Bill Sherbuck is here. Bill, I was thinking I was delighted that he got the multi-lit copy back into the fold, so to speak. I just got a great feeling about it. How did you react when you heard about it? Or you were watching it, maybe, were you?
It was exactly what I was hoping it was going to happen. I was supposed to go down to New York that day to be on site. I was there for the first two Sotheby's auctions, and but I had one of those nights where I slept like 3 hours, and there was just no way I was getting on a train and going down to New York in all that heat to do that. But I was texting with Sally, the executive director at Stepping Stones, throughout the thing, and there was a guy also in the audience that I know, and he was texting me. So what's going on?
Oh,
But it was a long wait, 2.5 hours till we got to the end, and and then the bidding was just, I mean, it was a dramatic thing the way they did that, And she did some brilliant bidding. I don't know who was coaching her, but man, she did some really brilliant bidding, and they got it. And so the first three times this has been auctioned off in the past 19 years, it's always gone to a collector. So it goes to a collector. It's like, how could I, as a researcher, get my hands on it? I don't even know who the collector is, typically who owns it usually. So, but now it's going to be in a proper Alcoholics Anonymous archive where it's going to be taken care of properly and be made available to people properly. And they said they kept saying that we got it. We're bringing it home. We're bringing it home, they said. And I thought that was really, really great. And I talked to Sally before this auction a couple of times, and they just did not have time to. They didn't have enough cash to go and make that kind of a bid. But she marshaled a bunch of people who gave donations specifically for this auction bid, and most of that, I mean, I don't know what the percentage was, but I suspect easily most of that money came out of special people who were just approached and did it. They did it. So anyhow, that's great, great.
and there's a picture on the screen, Bill, of they have it up like that already on Stepping Stones. We have it open on the page. This is the page. I was interested to know what page they had it on, and I looked it up, and this is the page they have it up on. The two pages, that one,
Right.
and they have it on this one with H. Hank gets a little mention, and this is bottles were only a symbol. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's beautiful, isn't it? To see it like
Yeah.
that. It's not gorgeous so you
Yeah.
get more information on Stepping Stones if you want on that. So that was the multi-lit. I think 200 and what was it? No, 2,383,000, which fantastic. They got it. And they have it forever now. For all time now.
And for those of you who like to talk about the grace of God, I found out afterwards that final bid they put in was the last bid they could put in. That was all the money they had
Oh,
committed to this thing.
wow, good drama. Oh, Bill.
All and I don't know if you watched it. I watched it, live at Christie's. So she bids 1.9, and then the guy who'd been online doing it, he must have given him 4 minutes. So
Really?
hopefully, he said, you want to go to 2 million, or how about 1.95? Because she had started doing these half steps already, and which was just brilliant the way she bid. I've been on a bunch of auctions, and I wouldn't have been smart enough to do what she did. She did a really, really, really good job. And but yeah, I found that afterwards, like that was it.
They had not left. What was his last bid? Was his bid before that like 2 million or two hundred
No,
thousand?
his was 1 point. His was I think 1.75. I could be right. I could be wrong
Yeah,
about that. I can't remember. Can't remember. But
yeah.
she did a jump at the end. She didn't just go a half step. She went like a step and a half and just said, okay, 19, 19.
It's great, isn't it?
I was dying waiting for this guy to make up his mind whether he's going to go $2 million on this thing. So
And how
anyhow,
long did he give him? Did he give him 3 minutes, 2 minutes that time? How long did he give him in the end before they went sold? How long did he, do you know how long roughly?
yeah, once they do the soul, that's a done deal. Now, the nice thing is for me was this yesterday, I got an email from some guy. who's just dying to buy my Jim Burwell manuscript offline, and he wanted some more information on it. And I thought, I wonder if that's the guy who didn't win this thing. We'll find out. We'll find out. More will be
Will
revealed.
be revealed. Well, thanks for that, Bill. That's Jim Morley. Did you want to mention that on that before we go into the reading? Because we're
No, I didn't. I didn't have any additional comments. I think it was great that they brought it home. I just, and it was, very dramatic. I too watched it live on the Christie's live streaming site, and it was, I was just sitting there waiting. Is it going to go? I knew it was going to go for more than that, and when it went for 1.9 and then I got the word from someone here who will remain nameless that yes, it was that it was Stepping Stones that got it. That's just it belonged to Lois. In the end. And she wanted it to belong to AA, but it couldn't in the way things happened the last time, how badly it was botched, the whole thing with the GSO suing and all of that.
Oh, yeah.
So it's about as close as it can be with our traditions and everything else. It's close to home. It's at Stepping Stones where Bill and Lois lived. Kudos to them for making it happen.
Yeah. And did you, Bill? So you just said, sorry, you just said that you didn't know who won it. Why didn't you know who you didn't? You weren't being told who was bidding. Is that what was happening?
Yeah, no.
Oh,
The
oh,
bidders weren't. I did hear
I
on
see.
some of the other ones, I would hear something like, "All right, Connecticut, what is your bid?" And I thought, Connecticut, who do I know that lives in Connecticut? And I would hear him bidding on some of the big book first editions, and but yeah, it was just a real nice surprise
Lovely.
when we found out who got the bid.
The live feed just focused on the auctioneer. That was it.
That's
That's
right.
all you saw was the auctioneer. Sally sent me a picture of the room from where she was sitting, and there was like one person in 4 or 5 rows in front of her. That's because anybody who's a serious bidder in an auction wants to be in the back of the room so they can see who else is bidding. You don't want to have 4 people behind you challenging you with bids and not knowing who the hell they are. Because sometimes you look at them and you think, that guy's got way more money than I do, so I'm going to shut up, And anyhow, auctions are just, I've been to some crazy, crazy auctions. I was at an auction one time at Sotheby's where there was like 175 lots of rare books, and 165 of them sold to one of these two guys that were bidding on the phones back and forth. And every single book they bought, they could have bought online for 2/3 of what they were bidding at Christie's for, at Sotheby's for. It was just, nobody in the room could believe it. There was all these dealers there, and they were, so there's a book that would sell for $10,000, and these guys were buying it for 15, plus the juice. It's a 27% they add on to that the auction house adds on to that these days. Used to be 10 and 15 and 20, then 20. Now it's 27.
Yeah, I don't know. Have you ever seen, there was one first edition, first printing that went for what, like $50,000? Have you seen them go that high before? I was surprised at that.
Yeah, but that one was signed by Bill. Wasn't it signed by some people?
Yeah, I think so. I think it was the first one that they auctioned off. The other ones went for much less. But
Yeah,
when that one went for 50, I was surprised at that.
If there's sign, I mean, I sold the first edition one time. Did not have an original dust jacket that was signed by Bill Wilson, Dr. Bob, and Jim Burwell. And
Wow.
I don't know. I don't remember. I think I got 75 grand for that.
Yeah.
And especially if it's dated. As I remember, when Bill Wilson, the one that was signed was like 1956. And the book's 1939. So guys are running around catching Bill at meetings and say, "Hey, would you sign my red book here?" And But if you can get one that's signed in 1939, that's worth more money than one signed in 1956. Just
Right.
is.
Yeah.
Well, I have a writing the big book signed by Mr. Sherberg, so I'm going to wait. He signed my first edition of the writing the big book, so that's where I'm at.
Mine too.
Thank you, Jim. We're reading Writing the Big Book, The Creation of AA. Thank you, Bill Sherberg. Of course, Jim is going to read it along with us, and we've got other members who are going to read as well. So this is titled Chapter 22, or should I say it's Chapter 22. It's titled A Vision for You, and we're in November 1938. I open it up, the first paragraph, and then we go to Jim. So November had been a busy month for Bill Wilson. Besides dealing with Hank's 2 writing projects and whatever fallout, personal or otherwise, that may have accompanied those efforts, he continued to polish the 7 chapters already written and started work on A Vision for You, the chapter which would appear at the end of the first half of the book. In addition to all the distraction caused by this ongoing editing and writing, a truly disappointing event, one that would have a significant impact on Wilson personally and on his subsequent writing of the 12 Steps, occurred in the first week of November. Ebby Thatcher was back in town and he wasn't doing well. Ebby had spent a successful and sober summer on Fitzmayo's farm in Maryland, quote, looking after Fitz's kids, end quote. While there, most of his time and attention had been focused on the Mayo's youngest daughter, who was 7 years old and stricken with diabetes. Thatcher reported his primary job that summer was to take her swimming and watch over her, and he concluded with some satisfaction that he, quote, had a lovely summer with the Mayos. So the first subheading today is Ebby Thatcher's struggle to stay sober.
Fitz and Ebby arrived back in Brooklyn on Tuesday, November 1st, and attended the regular meeting there that night. But just a few days later, Ebby Thatcher was dead drunk again, or as he candidly admitted in his later reminiscence, quote, I, of course, reached for the bottle again and was soon in trouble, end quote. Trouble indeed. Not only did Ebby get rip-roaring drunk, he also took 2 other residents of the Wilsons' sober house, Brooke B. and George H., along with him on this drinking spree. Bill was furious, and when he found Ebby and Brooke both drunk again the next day, he threw them out of the house before they could embarrass themselves or anyone else at the meeting that night. Back on the street and with nowhere to go, Thatcher was told about, quote, a place in New Jersey called the Keswick Colony of Mercy for Drunkards, end quote, and he went there shortly after Armistice Day, November 11th. Ebby spent the winter with that group, immersing himself in their very Christian approach to sobriety, which of course was nothing new to him given his earlier involvement with the Oxford group. But religion wasn't working for Ebby Thatcher anymore. He just couldn't stay sober. Even when Jack, his politically influential older brother, got him one of the choice jobs available at the New York World's Fair, held during the summer of 1939 and 1940.
Jim, you good?
Okay. I did not sober up. I managed to drink and hold that job sufficiently well. And with so many people there and crowds, I wasn't noticed much. I got away with it all summer until the fair closed in the fall. And I started up with some old cronies in Brooklyn, drinking it up pretty hard. Then in the spring of 1940, I went to see my boss and convinced her that I was again on the straight and narrow and would she give me back my job. I held that and fell off again that summer and in the fall. I again went to this place in New Jersey and spent the winter there. Throughout the least parts of this period, Lois reports that Ebby was sober and even attending meetings. But if his own report is accurate, he could only have created that impression by showing up on Lois's doorstep on one of his good days. By his own account, he was nowhere close to sober for any length of time, from early November 1938 until he secured a government job in Philadelphia as an associate inspector of naval materials shortly after the attack on Pearl Harbor in December 1941, parentheses, a job that allowed him to keep his distance from alcohol for most of the following year. Bill Wilson could never quite figure out what was missing from Ebby's program, and it was a question that genuinely troubled and perplexed him. Years later, he noted that Thatcher was, quote unquote, sicker than I realized, and speculated that what, quote, caused his backsliding later on, end quote, was most likely the fact that he, quote, took little interest in other alcoholics, end quote. According to Bill, Ebby just never adopted the, quote, when all other measures fail, work with another alcoholic, end quote, model of recovery, or acted on the group's belief that, quote, nothing will so much ensure immunity from drinking as intensive work with other alcoholics. It works when other activities fail, end quote. Ebby Thatcher clearly preferred the lone wolf model, even if it meant that he continued to drink. Lois basically agreed with Bill's assessment, but her opinions on the subject of Ebby's constant relapses went even further.
After those first 2 years in the Oxford group, why did Ebby get drunk? It was he who gave Bill the philosophy that kept him sober. Why didn't it keep Abby sober? He was sincere, I'm sure. Perhaps it was the difference in the degree of wanting sobriety. Bill wanted it with his whole soul. Ebby may have wanted it simply to keep out of trouble. But maybe he couldn't want it with his whole soul because he was too ill. Beyond that crucial visit with Bill, Ebby seemed to do very little about helping others. He never appeared really a member of AA. After his first slip, many harmful thoughts seemed to take possession of him, and he appeared jealous of Bill and critical, even when sober, of both the Oxford group and AA. Whatever the cause, Ebby's ongoing inability to stop drinking and stay sober would haunt Bill throughout the month of November and play a significant role in his thinking as he moved closer to the day he would finally write down the 12 steps in early December.
Towns seeks Henry Ford's endorsement.
Wilson had been sending each new chapter of the book, and perhaps even some of the more significant altered versions, to Charles Towns as visible proof that his monthly support check was being put to good use. Charles was, quote unquote, greatly pleased with everything he read and consistently encouraged Bill to continue writing, enthusiastically urging him to finish the project as quickly as possible. At this time, no non-alcoholic was a bigger cheerleader or more supportive of the plan to complete this book and bring it to press than Charles B. Towns. But as the manuscript grew, Bill began to worry more and more about, quote, the problem of securing the right person to authenticate the book, end quote. Wilson thought it was of paramount importance that someone famous, someone with instant name recognition, be persuaded to write a preface or foreword for their book, one that would vouch for their work and lend credibility to the chapters that followed. This, he said, was so critical that until they secured, quote, such an endorsement, obviously, publication of the book would have to wait, end quote. Besides the clear value of such a name endorsing their solution for alcoholism, Bill had two other reasons for his refusal to publish until he could include such a prominent public testimonial. First, he was convinced that a glowing endorsement by a really famous man would generate enormous publicity and thus guarantee them a large initial sale of the book. In addition, with such a high-profile endorsement in place, Wilson was confident they could easily raise the $2,500 needed to print the book, along with whatever funds would be required immediately after publication to maintain their operation while the book's royalties began to cover expenses. Bill's dream candidate for this prominent person to write was such a preface had long been and continued to be the celebrated car maker Henry Ford. A more famous name, with a legendary hatred of alcohol and an established commitment to temperance, could hardly be imagined. Bill discussed the problem with Charles Towns and enlisted his support in his attempts to make contact with Ford. Trading on their past relationship, however brief and tenuous it may have been in 1914 or 1915, Charles wrote a letter of introduction for Bill on his personal letterhead addressed to Henry Ford.
November 16, 1938. Mr. Henry Ford, Detroit, Michigan. Dear Mr. Ford, this will introduce to you Mr. William G. Wilson. Mr. Wilson has had remarkable success during the last 4 years in the rehabilitation of the alcoholic drinker. His work has a semi-religious background, and he has summed it up in a manuscript which is now ready for the press, except for the foreword. In considering the matter of someone who would give this publication the prestige it should have, I could find no one I thought would be so eligible to do this as yourself. You doubtless can recall the conditions under which we met some years ago, before the opening of the Ford Hospital. In view of my special work and your interest in trying to reclaim the alcoholic unfortunate, I was invited to Detroit as your guest, and as a result, 2 physicians associated with your sociological department brought to my hospital in New York a dozen patients addicted to drugs and alcohol, and the results were satisfactory to all concerned. I would appreciate any consideration you may give this request. Very sincerely yours, Charles B. Towns, CBT.
Towns mention of the fact that the manuscript as quote now ready for the press except for the forward end quote is a bit problematic, since this was certainly not true on November 16th, 1938. However, Charles's claim can be understood in 3 possible ways. First of all, saying the book was ready for the press would make the need for a forward just that much more pressing, and thereby hopefully elicit a swifter response from Ford. Claiming, "We're only waiting for you before we can begin with this great news of recovery to suffering alcoholics everywhere," sounds very much like a ploy to catch Henry Ford's attention and to get his consent as quickly as possible. Second, by this date, Charles Towns had already seen a draft of A Vision for You, which Bill would have informed him was to be the last chapter in the front half of the book. From that perspective, and unaware that Wilson still had 2 very critical chapters to write, parenthesis, something Bill Wilson was most likely not aware of himself in mid-November, Towns's misconception that the book was complete would be perfectly understandable. Finally, it is possible, though least likely, that Charles wrote this letter with the understanding that Bill would not use it until the book was actually reached that point of completion. Like the letter Leonard Strong had written to introduce Bill to Willard Richardson more than a year earlier, Towns's letter was meant to be first mailed and then handed over as a formal introduction during the first meeting with the addressee. Unfortunately, the actual use of such a letter was predicated on getting an appointment with the great man, and this was something neither Towns nor Wilson ever managed to do. 7 weeks later, in his January 4th letter to Frank Amos, Bill was still looking for someone to facilitate this all-important connection with Henry Ford, and he earnestly noted that, quote, the discussion of the manner of approach, end quote, to people such as Ford and other prominent men, quote, should perhaps be one of the main considerations of the next foundation meeting, end quote. If the Rockefeller people couldn't open that particular door for them, then who could? However, there is no record that Bill Wilson ever met with Henry Ford, and therefore he never had the opportunity to present Charles Towns' letter or to get a polite face-to-face refusal for his request. Whatever attempts Bill made to reach the legendary automaker were successfully blocked by one of the many functionaries who typically surround and buffer the super rich from ever having to deal with such solicitations directly.
A vision for how to get and stay sober. Bill Wilson knew that sooner or later he would have to face the challenge of creating a chapter that outlined in the clearest possible terms the actions needed to get and then stay sober. It was, he later commented, a problem that, quote, had secretly worried their life out of, quote, unquote, him for months before he finally got around to writing it. But so long as there was even one other chapter still to be written, Bill would elect to work on that rather than face the intimidating task of trying to put down on paper the exact details of their program of recovery. Once again, he may have been guided by Hank's mid-June outline enumerating the elements that should be found in their book, and perhaps even referred back to the handwritten quote-unquote ideas Parkhurst had offered him shortly before creating his outline. But whether Bill formally did this or not, it is certain that Hank was still constantly arguing with him on a number of fronts, hoping to win approval for his own perspective on a wide variety of issues. In his quote-unquote ideas, Hank had suggested they include, even begin with, a history of the work in order to, quote, establish proof of success of the work and carry hope to everyone, end quote, who read it. Although Bill Wilson had not opened the book that way, he was now about to close it with just such an account. In a similar vein, Hank's outline had proposed they include a chapter that, quote, will disclose our life as a group, our work as a group, our present situations, end quote. And that's from Hank's chapter, of course, number 24. And these points would also be fully addressed in this new chapter.
Bill incorporated both of Hank's suggestions into A Vision for You by presenting a detailed history of their beginnings as a group, and then strongly suggesting that this should serve as the model for any reader trying to build his own community of local sober men. The chapter was nothing less than an earnest presentation of the extremely high hopes both Wilson and Parkhurst had for the book, and their confidence that it would not only carry the message of recovery to isolated individuals, but also provide a concrete and practical plan that would spark the formation of Alcoholics Anonymous groups all across the country.
The Alcoholics' Isolation.
Bill opens this final chapter by clearly stating one of the alcoholic's most distressing problems: the terrible isolation endured by both active and recovered alcoholics, offering a particularly graphic description of that painfully secluded state. Wilson paints this depressing picture in just 4 paragraphs, using some of the most ostentatious and elaborate writing found in the Big Book. Bill was certainly known to produce his fair share of purple prose over the years, but the writing here is so ornate and extravagant that it is enough to make one wonder if he didn't start this chapter by modifying and correcting a document originally written by Hank Parkhurst, and that some of Hank's verbal excesses had simply slipped through the cracks during the editing process. The following quote from the second paragraph of the chapter more than adequately demonstrates these flowery excesses. In the quote, "As we became subjects of King Alcohol, shivering denizens of his mad realm, the chilling vapor that is loneliness settled down. It thickened, ever becoming blacker. Some of us sought out sordid places, hoping to find understanding companionship and approval. Momentarily we did. Then would come oblivion and the awful awakening to face the hideous 4 horsemen: terror, bewilderment, frustration, despair. Unhappy drinkers who read this page will understand." In the end quote. This florid account of the drinker's isolation is followed by an almost equally grim prediction of the loneliness the ex-alcoholic will face once he quits drinking. Although sober, he will now, quote, "be unable to imagine life either with alcohol or without it. Then he will know loneliness such as few do. He will be at the jumping off place. He will wish for the end," end quote. In despair, such a man will desperately ask, quote, "Am I to be consigned to a life where I shall be stupid, boring, and glum like some righteous people I see? I know I must get along without liquor, but can I? Have you a sufficient substitute?" End
The
quote.
fellowship as the solution.
Having so luridly illustrated the problem, Wilson then is only slightly less effusive in his presentation of the wonderful solution he claims to be so close at hand.
Yes, there is a substitute, and it is vastly more than that. It is a fellowship in Alcoholics Anonymous. There you will find release from care, boredom, and worry. Your imagination will be fired. Life will mean something at last. The most satisfactory years of your existence lie ahead. Thus we find the fellowship, and so will you.
In a nutshell, this is the promised vision that Bill is offering the new man: a meaningful life lived within a growing community of sober men, free from boredom, care, and worry, a life that will prove to be not just exciting, but truly richer and more satisfying than anything the reformed drunk has ever experienced before. But however tempting all these benefits might sound to the newly sober man, he will understandably still be confused about how such wonderful things could actually happen to him, not to mention being intimidated by the many challenges that such a radical change in his life would present. His expected response are likely to be, quote, "How is this to come about?" end quote, and, quote, "Where am I to find these people?" end quote. To this, Wilson confidently replies,
You are going to meet these new friends in your own community. Near you, alcoholics are dying helplessly, like people in a sinking ship. Among them, you will make lifelong friends. You will be bound to them with new and wonderful ties, for you will escape disaster together, and you will commence shoulder to shoulder your common journey. The practical answer is that since these things have happened among us, they can happen again. Should you wish them above all else, and should you be willing to make use of our experience, we are sure they will come.
referring the reader back to the explicit directions provided in Working with Others on how to approach and aid others. Bill notes that implementing these suggestions will surely result in several local families adopting the AA solution. Once that happens, the leader of this growing sober community would want to know more of how to proceed from that point, and Wilson proposes that the best way to answer that question would be, quote, "to describe the growth of the fellowship amongst us," end quote. Rather than delivering a list of step-by-step directions on what to do next, Bill tells a long, detailed story, parenthesis 34 of the 56 paragraphs in this chapter, close parenthesis, about how the fellowship was first established and then grew in Akron.
The fellowship's beginnings and success in Akron.
Typical of many AA stories, Bill devotes 3/4 of his narrative to the backstory of how AA first began in Ohio. Parentheses, this being the working with others part of the account, close parentheses, before he gets to the stated purpose of this long section, the information the new man will want to know about how to proceed once others in his own area have achieved sobriety. Bill opens by telling of his business trip to Akron in late April of 1935 and how the failure of that venture brought him dangerously close to a drink. Faced with the, quote, "the old insidious insanity that first drink," end quote, he realized his only hope for staying sober was to reach out to another alcoholic. This provides the background for his initial meeting with Dr. Bob Smith, followed by the ups and downs of Smith's first attempts to stay sober. Once they had successfully negotiated those problems, the two men realized, quote, they must keep spiritually active, end quote, if there was to be any hope for them to remain drink-free, as they set off to find a, quote, first-class alcoholic prospect, end quote, to work with. This led to their encounter with Bill Dotson, the man on the bed, at a local hospital, and his acceptance of their program of recovery, which is detailed in a long section that includes a fair amount of dialogue among the three men. The first phase of this foundational story then concludes with Wilson noting that after several failures to find others, a fourth man turned up who also agreed to follow their suggestions and successfully stopped drinking. Bill had now reached the point in the story where, after spending 3 months in Akron, he finally returns to New York City, leaving 3 men behind in Ohio who had to cope with the problems of how to preserve both their individual and collective sobriety. He wrote that these men, quote, had found something brand new in life. Though they knew they must help other alcoholics if they would remain sober, that motive became secondary. It was transcended by the happiness they found in giving themselves for others. They shared their homes, their slender resources, and gladly devoted their spare hours to fellow sufferers. They were willing by day or night to place a new man in the hospital and visit him afterward. They grew in numbers, end quote. The next 6 paragraphs continue the Akron saga by describing the fact that over the next year and a half, 7 more men were successfully recruited in this small group, maintained their sobriety by structuring their days in such a way that they saw, quote, much of each other, and scarce an evening passed that someone's home did not shelter a little gathering of men and women, happy in their release and constantly thinking how they might present their discovery to some newcomer. In addition to these casual get-togethers, it became customary to set aside one night a week for a meeting to be attended by anyone or everyone interested in a spiritual way of life. Aside from fellowship and sociability, the prime object was to provide a time and place where new people might bring their problems, end quote. Bill then goes to some lengths describing, quote, the stimulating and electric atmosphere of the place, end quote, where they meet each week and the loving and understanding companionship that permeates these gatherings. There, the newly sober man is reconnected with men who visited him in the hospital and, quote, in an upper room of this house, having heard the story of some man whose experience closely tallied with his own, he capitulated entirely, end quote. There he realizes he has found a, quote unquote, haven at last, one where he discovers a, quote, very practical approach to his problems, the absence of intolerance of any kind, along with the informality, the genuine democracy, and the uncanny understanding, end quote, that uniformly characterizes this new program of recovery. Over the past 3 years, Bill proudly states this group has grown significantly and now boasts, quote unquote, 60 or 80 members who attended the weekly meetings. Concluding this long Ohio saga, Wilson lyrically expands his vision for the newly sober man, describing the many benefits that await him if only he works to replicate the, quote unquote, gay Akron scene in his own hometown. Quote, but life among Alcoholics Anonymous is more than attending meetings and visiting hospitals, cleaning up old scrapes, helping to settle family differences, explaining the disinherited son to his irate parents, lending money and securing jobs for each other when justified. These are everyday occurrences. No one is too discredited nor has sunk too low to be welcomed cordially if he means business. Social distinctions, petty rivalries, and jealousies, these are laughed out of countenance. Being wrecked in the same vessel, being restored and united under one God, with hearts and minds attuned to the welfare of others, the things which matter so much to some people no longer signify much to them. How could they? End quote.
A model for how AA can work. This detailed presentation of the founding of AA in Ohio, comprising almost 60% of the chapter, serves a number of purposes simultaneously. For one thing, Bill has finally satisfied Hank Parkhurst's ongoing insistence that the book include, quote, a history of the work, end quote, although he had done so in a way that fit within his own understanding of the proper layout for the book. In addition, the Akron story was a perfect way for Wilson to offer the new man a model for how groups could be organized and share their collective sobriety once they had begun to grow beyond just a few men. But perhaps most of all, this long section explicitly recognizes Dr. Bob Smith's tremendous success in Ohio, giving generous credit where credit was due, and thereby hopefully claiming some of the negative reactions that were still coming out of Akron whenever the book project was mentioned. Almost bending over backwards, Wilson diligently strives to present a frank and honest account of the way the Akron program of recovery, so different from that in New York, actually worked. Although he's careful to never mention the Oxford group by name, a fact that might have annoyed some Ohio members since the Akron people still thought they were Oxford groupers, Wilson does give credit to certain unnamed, quote, outsiders who became interested, end quote, in their fellowship, and notes that one couple even went so far as to offer their home to the group for their weekly Wednesday night meeting. Bill also clearly emphasizes the fact that this gathering was open to anyone interested in a spiritual way of life. underlined the fact that recovering alcoholics were not the only people who attended these weekly meetings. In addition, several Oxford Group practices, such as the description of the new man's surrender, quote, in an upper room of this house, end quote, and the explicit admission that these members were all, quote, united under one God, end quote, were also freely acknowledged. While the claim that the Akron group was united under one God was certainly true at this time, we apprentices state the Ohio program of recovery was still explicitly and exclusively Christian, end parentheses. It would not have been possible to say the same thing of the more pluralistic approach then being taken in New York, because as noted earlier, several members of that group, and most especially Burwell and Parkhurst, were actively advocating and practicing a much more flexible approach to divinity than would ever be tolerated in Akron. Just to point out, there is a footnote there if people are following along. We're not reading them this time, but it's a tremendous footnote. Despite these differences, by candidly and explicitly presenting all of these Akron elements in his retelling of the group's founding, Bill Wilson had effectively moved the Ohio model to center stage and held it up as the template for ongoing collective success in Alcoholics Anonymous. He had, for all intent and purposes, given the Akron people their own chapter in the book, and I'm looking forward to talking to Mr. Schaberg, the author, about that at the end. A universal solution. Back to you, Mr. Schaberg.
After these 34 substantial paragraphs devoted to Ohio, Wilson casually downplays the subsequent events in New York, devoting just 2 paragraphs to the fact that, quote, under only slightly different conditions, the same thing is taking place in several eastern cities, end quote. Even here, Bill devotes most of these 2 paragraphs to the work being done by the understanding and helpful doctor in a, quote, well-known hospital for the treatment of alcoholic and drug addiction, end quote, before adding that, quote, in the eastern city, there are informal meetings such as we have described to you, where you may see 30 or 40 people in attendance. So much for any elaboration on the different brand of AA then being practiced in New York City. Having told the reader how the fellowship was established, grew, and spread in these 2 areas, Wilson returns to his promotion of the expansive vision promised by the chapter's title. Quote, someday, end quote, he says, quote, we hope that every alcoholic who journeys will find a fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous at his destination, end quote. And he notes that currently several sober members who are salesmen were going about introducing the AA message into other communities. But even without this kind of direct support, he advises, quote, though you be but one man with this book in your hand, we believe and hope it contains all that you will need to begin, end quote. He goes on to encourage the reader to not be discouraged, to not let himself be overwhelmed.
We know what you're thinking. You're saying to yourself, I'm jittery and alone. I couldn't do that. But you can. You forget that you have just now tapped a source of power so much greater than yourself. To duplicate with such backing what we have accomplished is only a matter of willingness, patience, and labor.
Once again, Bill reinforces his point by telling a story, this one about a member of the fellowship who recently, parenthesis, quote, only a few days ago, as this writing, end quote, close parenthesis, had moved to a new town where, quote, but a few weeks, end quote, he discovered that it, quote, probably contained more alcoholics per square mile than any city in the country, end quote. The man contacted the prominent local psychiatrist who had, quote, certain responsibilities for the mental health of the community, end quote. This doctor freely admitted his inability to provide any meaningful help to active alcoholics, and he agreed to the man's suggestion that the AA program should be tested, quote, among his patients and certain other alcoholics from the clinic which he attends, end quote. This doctor's acceptance resulted in the introduction to, quote, the chief psychiatrist of a large public hospital, end quote, who also agreed to try the new method with, quote, some others from the stream of misery which flows through that institution, end quote.
So our fellow worker will soon have friends galore. Some of them may sink and perhaps never get up. But if our experience is a criterion, more than half of those approached will become fellows of Alcoholics Anonymous. When a few men in this city have found themselves and have discovered the joy of helping others to face life again, there will be no stopping until everyone in that town has had his opportunity to recover, if he can and will.
This belief in the universal applicability and accessibility of their new method of getting sober is typical of Bill Wilson's enthusiasm about recovery. He was certain it would be successfully adopted wherever and whenever it was given an honest opportunity to succeed.
The quote, road of happy destiny, end quote.
In his stirring conclusion, considered important enough to be regularly read aloud at some AA meetings today, Bill Wilson concludes the front half of the book on a high note. He begins by emphasizing their thoroughly pragmatic approach to recovery and then proclaims the benefits that are freely available to the new man if only he abandons himself to God, quote, unquote, as you understand God, and then carefully follows the pathway to recovery that has been methodically laid out for him.
Our book is meant to be suggestive only. We realize we know only a little. God will constantly disclose more to you and to us. Ask him in your morning meditation what you can do each day for the man who is still sick. The answers will come if your own house is in order. But obviously you can't transmit something you haven't got. See to it that your relationship with him is right, and great events will come to pass for you and countless others. This is the great fact for us. Abandon yourself to God as you understand God. Admit your faults to him and your fellows. Clear away the wreckage of your past. Give freely of what you find and join us. We shall be with you in the fellowship of the Spirit, and you will surely meet some of us as you trudge the road of happy destiny. May God bless you and keep you until then.
Towns approaches the AMA.
Charles Towns was particularly pleased with this new chapter, so much so that he immediately included it in one of his many efforts to publicize and promote the fellowship. Bill later praised Charles, noting he was consistently, quote, raising heaven and earth to get publicity for us, end quote. And in November, Towns's attempt to get publicity for them took the form of a long letter to the American Medical Association, quote, setting forth his observations on the work, end quote, and requesting their support for this new method of curing alcoholism. Along with that letter, Charles sent the AMA a copy of A Vision for You, thinking it would provide some concrete evidence of the spectacular results this new method was currently having out in the real world. Towns's letter was convincing enough to generate quote-unquote great interest at the AMA, but like This Week magazine and Good Housekeeping, his proposal raised issues that troubled the reader. An official of the association responded promptly enough to Charles, but he included several questions that he felt needed to be answered before a proper response could be formulated. A few weeks later, when Bill Wilson recounted the story of this exchange to Frank Amos, he noted that the AMA wanted to know, quote, what sort of organization we were, who the officers were, what we used for money, and where Mr. Towns figured in, end quote. Towns had no ready answers for these questions, and feeling more than a little challenged, he asked Bill to help him draft a reply. Wilson later explained that they had responded to the American Medical Association by saying that there was no organization in the conventional sense of the word, that for the past 4 years the work has been financed by alcoholics themselves, that recently the Alcoholic Foundation had been formed to administer matters of money, etc., that the majority of trustees of that foundation were disinterested and well known in New York City, that a few modest donations had been made to the foundation, that the work would never be on a fee or professional basis, that outsiders could not deal with this group in financial matters touching the work without approval of the trustees. And finally, that Mr. Towns had advanced certain monies to promote publication of the book, but that Alcoholics Anonymous had not obligated themselves to him in any way, parentheses, except for return of his money, close parentheses, that Mr. Towns hoped and expected his business would increase on account of our group because men in it had taken his treatment and liked it, and probably would recommend that others do likewise if the occasion warranted. Mr. Towns stated explicitly that that was his only relationship with us, and that he saw no reason why it should ever be any different. He also added that the Towns treatment was in use in Akron with his consent, but at no profit to himself.
This last bit of information about the town's treatment being used in Akron is interesting, but a bit perplexing. At the time, the most commonly used treatment to allay the cravings for alcohol in Ohio was a forced regime of sauerkraut, tomatoes, and Caro corn syrup, which was most definitely not, quote, the town's treatment, close quotes. As Ernie Galbraith, the first man successfully recruited into AA after Bill Dotson, remembered, quote, there were lots of recommendations made. Diets of tomatoes, sauerkraut, corn syrup, which we found out were all experimental. But at the same time, in those days, Bill and Doc were anxious to try anything that any MD could suggest that might be able to take away any craving for a whiskey. I can remember that tomato deal and that corn syrup that they used to lap up over there in the kitchen by the case. I can see it now. Doc with tomatoes and a big can of Caro, a big spoon. You got to the place where it almost gagged you, taking it straight. Doc did back down on the sauerkraut. He kept up the tomatoes and corn syrup for years. Despite Wilson's, and that's the end of the quote. Despite Wilson's and Towns's carefully crafted answers, the AMA did not respond to this request until the following October, when, 6 months after its publication, they reviewed the book, Alcoholics Anonymous, in the Journal of the American Medical Association. That review was short and negative in the extreme. After characterizing the group as, quote, an organization which would save other addicts by a kind of religious conversion, close quotes, it dismissively concluded that, quote, the book contains instructions as to how to intrigue the alcoholic addict into the acceptance of divine guidance in place of alcohol, in terms strongly reminiscent of Dale Carnegie and the adherents of the Bookman, open parentheses, quote, Oxford, close quotes, close parentheses, movement. The one valid thing in the book is the recognition of the seriousness of addiction to alcohol. Other than this, the book has no scientific merit or interest, close quotes. So much for the 1938 hopes that the American Medical Association would support AA's program of recovery.
Wishing Bill Wilson a happy birthday.
November ended on a high but somewhat unusual note. Bill Wilson turned 43 years old on the 26th of the month, and early that day he received a phone call from Dr. Bob Smith wishing him a, quote, happy birthday, close quotes. But Bob said nothing to prepare him for the flurry of at least 11 celebratory telegrams that arrived at Clinton Street later that day. One from New York was sent by an otherwise unknown person, Mary Lewis, who wished, quote, may your beautiful efforts toward humanity see many more happy birthdays. Your book will prove to the world your sacrifices and goodness, close quotes. Another local telegram originating in Brooklyn was signed, quote unquote, all of us, and read, quote, happy birthday, Bill. We feel this an appropriate time to let you know how thankful and grateful we are that God chose you to help us over the rough spots, close quotes. The other 9 telegrams all came from Akron, sent by Bill Dotson, Archie Trowbridge, Paul Stanley, Ernie Galbraith, Tom Lucas, T. Henry Williams, Dick Stanley, Wally Gillum, and Walter Bray, frequently including their wives as co-signers. Most of these messages confined themselves to standard short greetings and wishes that Bill's day would be happy, but a few were a bit more expansive. Bill Dotson included, quote, the wish that every other day of the year will be happy too, close quotes. And Paul Stanley's hope for Wilson was that he might have, quote, many more of such years of usefulness, close quotes. Paul's brother Dick offered, quote, "Congratulations on the anniversary of the birth of such an all-round good fellow and loyal friend," close quotes. And the Williamses didn't forget to include, quote, "Love to Lois," close quotes, in their message.
The telegram from the New York group, signed all of us, said they felt it was, quote unquote, an appropriate time for such a demonstration of love and support. But other than this unhelpful clue, it's hard to know exactly what might have prompted this effusive outpouring. It is also noteworthy that this is the only year in which this seems to have happened. There are no birthday telegrams in the GSO archive from the previous years or for the years immediately following this. They only appear in 1938. But whatever the impetus, it was clearly an orchestrated effort. Interestingly, the New Yorkers felt they were well covered by one collective telegram, while the people in Ohio sent individual greetings. It can be imagined that perhaps Dr. Bob Smith had initiated and encouraged the Akron members to do this in an attempt to show some much needed appreciation and support for Bill Wilson, acknowledging his central role in the founding of Alcoholics Anonymous, parenthesis, and also tangentially of the book, question mark, close parenthesis. But however likely it might be to imagine the scenario of Dr. Bob using his influence to rally support for Bill's big project, it must remain just that, speculation.
Thank you. Chapter 22, A Vision for You, November 1938. Wonderful. You can't mute. You show some appreciation for that. Wonder how long that took you to put together, Bill.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks,
That was fun.
Isn't that good?
Yeah, thank you, everybody.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Bill. Thanks,
Thank you
David.
all. Thank you, Bill. That was it. Interesting.
Thanks.
Just so I'm going to go straight to Bill. A lot of questions. I'm sure people have a lot of questions on this one, Bill.
Well, I was thinking we would probably not have many questions on this one, David, but we're going to see. We'll see how this goes. A couple of things. The whole idea of Ebby slipping and sliding and Bill not understanding what's going on. I thought Lois's comment that he never really was working to help other alcoholics. You know, I mean, we talk about the fact that there's two aspects to what we do in AA. One of them is the program, which is basically the 12 steps, and the other one is the fellowship, which is basically the moral psychology element. And it's interesting to me that Ebby was big on that whole religious side of the equation. He was deeply immersed in that from both the Oxford group and this Christian fellowship over in New Jersey, but he wasn't big on getting involved with that. He just like he didn't join up, if you will. I don't know. It just didn't happen that way. Hank, on the other hand, was a big join up guy, but he wasn't too big on that whole religious stuff. So it's just curious and interesting to me that neither of those guys stayed substantially sober, and so let's be careful about being just one or the other, I guess, might be the message there. The other thing is if you've seen my presentation on working with others, all these suggestions at the bottom of page 426 about maybe why he was saying the manuscript was close to completion. I'm convinced now, I wasn't when I read this book, that this third suggestion here is the appropriate one. And I went back and as you'll see in that presentation, if you watch it, I went back and found 4 letters from November, 2 from Hank wrote one and Bill wrote one, and maybe Charles Towns wrote 2 of them. I can't remember, but there was 4 letters, and they all basically said, "We're done. Book's got, we just got to polish it up a little bit, and we're done." Bill tells Dr. Bob, "I'll be out in the first week of December or the second week at the latest." He hadn't even written the 12 steps yet. So anyhow, I did think Wilson thought that he was done. I thought that there is a solution presented the overall package. And then the 3 main elements of the suggested program of recovery was included in the you have no defense against the mental defense against the insanity of picking up the first drink. That's more about alcoholism. You need to get yourself a spiritual experience that can stand between you and the insanity of that first drink. That's we agnostics. And when all else fails, if those two things aren't working for you, go out and work with another alcoholic that's working with others. And I honestly believe that when Wilson got to this point in mid-November 1938, he thought he'd done a great job of presenting the program of recovery. But then I think he started worrying about slippery alcoholics. It probably might not be that self-evident to them. So what we need is something a little bit more orchestrated and done. So that was just, I mean, if I was going to be rewriting sections of this book, this is one place I would definitely do a rewrite. The problem is that I can't just pull stuff out and put in a new long section. It'd have to be a page or 2 pages long, because it would throw off all the endnote citations and the numbers would all go cockamamie and that. The only, I've made a couple of big changes in the book, but one of them I took out where I said Dr. Bob wasn't considered a co-founder till 46, and I was proven wrong on that by other people. But when I took that paragraph out and rewrote it, I think there was like 672 words, and I had to stick the 672 words in the rewrite of that new evidence that I had. So it was a challenge, let me tell you. The other thing I thought of when he talks about people going to other people's houses, just almost every day, that's what we do. When I came into AA in 1981, when I came into AA in Southern Connecticut, 96% of the meetings were 8:30 to 10 o'clock. 8:30 to 10 o'clock. And, there was a couple of lunch meetings, and there was a radical, thank God it's Friday meeting at 5 o'clock over in Westport, but that was about it. It was just, it was 8:30 to 10 o'clock. That's what it was. And of course, the idea, I think at the time, was when it started like that, is, those are your big drinking times. You're out of work, you've just had some dinner, and it's, if you're gonna have a slip, this is the sweet spot here. This is the problematic area. So what do? You go to a meeting from 8:30 to 10 o'clock. And in Connecticut, they were closing the liquor stores by 10 o'clock. You couldn't go out and buy booze. So if you didn't have any booze in your house, you were safe. And well, you could always go to a bar, but you know what I'm saying? It always seemed to me to be, so all the meetings were 90 minutes. All the meetings were 8:30 to 10 o'clock. And I think people would have a hard time with that today. Certainly old people like me. I'm trying to be in bed by 10 o'clock, let alone coming out of an AA meeting. And when I was 38 years old, when I got sober, I would be, we'd go out afterwards for coffee, and I'd be drinking coffee until midnight and then going to sleep. That stopped after 4 years. That coffee turned on me the way booze turned on me after 4 years, because I was drinking 12 to 15 cups a day. Shocking that it turned on me. Anyhow, I just, I actually made a list one time of the differences of what was going on in meetings in Fairfield, Connecticut in 1982, because I came in right at the end of December, 1982. And it was just, it's a laundry list of stuff, it's amazing, how different. People don't realize how different today, we didn't hold hands at the end. We didn't say, "Hi, Bill," when somebody said their name, oh man, it was just, everybody smoked. And anyhow, one of these days, David, I'll read that list for you.
Thank you, Bill. Let's go over to up or down to Cancun, I guess, whatever way you look at it. Jim Morley.
Hi, thank you, David. Thanks, Bill. This is one of those chapters that gets me thinking about a lot of things. Just happens to be coincidental that we mention and talk about Bill Dotson's story. Today is July 4th. The day when your ex-colonies, revolted, and David, and well, not yours, but anyway,
Thank you.
And that's July 4th is a date that's considered, the founding date for AA group number 1. Now, How many people consider that to be true is, because it was definitely an Oxford group type meeting, but a lot of things that happened. One of the things that has come up in the last few years was that it wasn't just Bill and Bob that went to visit him. Seemed they took Eddie Riley along with them when they went to visit Bill Dotson. I think it's in Not God. Ernie Kurtz talked to Eddie about that, and he said, "Yeah, I went with Bill and Bob the first time that they went to visit Bill Dotson." So it wasn't just the two of them. They were taking a newcomer along with them on a 12-step call. Now, and the part where a lot of what impresses me. Oh, first of all, I have to agree with your epiphany. That boy, this sure sounds like the end. What a rousing end there. Abandon yourself to God. What a great ending. And that Bill probably thought that was about maybe the end of his writing. And but what isn't in there, although it mentioned Akron a lot and they had their own chapter and all of that, is that it didn't really mention anything about what was going on there in Akron as far as the Oxford group and their practices. And, it said, yeah, we have a meeting once a week for anybody interested in spiritual life. And but when he talks about spiritual life, he said, well, we have to be spiritually active, and it didn't mention that they, had meetings or they went to church every day or they practiced yoga or did meditation or anything religious. In fact, they had to be spiritually active. And what did they do? They went to the hospital. That the focus seems to be, from what Bill tells in this story, is on fellowship. And only in about that last paragraph does he even mention anything that could be construed as any kind of steps. Abandon yourself to God, and help others clean up the wreckage of the past and that sort of thing, very in general terms. Maybe it was after that he realized that maybe I got to be a little more specific, because there was no, it talks about, hey, this is the fellowship and this is, this is your hope for salvation is the fellowship. No mention about that he very specifically gets into in chapter 5 that he wrote later, hey, here are the steps we took, which are suggested as a program of, there was nothing that about, hey, here's what we did. We were doing some steps and things like that. There's just nothing in there about any kind of steps or anything. But, a very hopeful chapter. I still, as many do, I still question about why the hell did he use the word trudge? Just doesn't make any sense to me. And I want a historical reason. I want Bill to tell me why he used that word. But anyway, one of the mysteries of the universe. Maybe we'll find out one day. But a great chapter. I found it very, very hopeful. So thank you.
Thank you, Jim Worley in Cancun. Before we just go into the Q&A, just raise your virtual hand first. I just want to let you know we're starting out this coming Friday. We're going to be going through Bill Schaberg's YouTube channel. We're going to start at the forewords. Bill went through all forewords, Doctor's Opinion, and all the chapters. So we're going to follow through that. I've been through the book many, many times with Joe and Charlie. I've been through it with Howard Eber, and I'm going to go through it with Bill Schaberg on YouTube. I have listened to them individually, but I'd like to go through. We're going to go through it on a Friday night. So that's this coming Friday. And then we have, as I just showed you there, we have a presentation on Distilled Spirits, which I think is an interesting book as well. Jim uses that a lot in his presentations, or sometimes he uses it. He quotes it. So that's Distilled Spirits by Don Lattin. Jim, you were in contact with him for us. And That's 17. And then Joe coming back on the 24th. And they're doing Joe and Charlie and the Big Book Awakening. Okay, you can raise your hand. I've got a question, but I want to wait and see someone else come in first. No, maybe I'll just ask you this, Bill, because Bill Sherbuck, I've been listening to you and reading your book for 6 years now, and it's been incredible. I have to say, it's just incredible. One of my favorite paragraphs in the big book is the subject of King Alcohol. You just slate that. Every time I read that, I think, no way, that is a great chapter, Bill Sherbuck. And I have to put up on the screen again, and I have put it, and I love this chapter. This is one of my favorite chapters. I quote it when I do a show. Subjects. I said, I'm not a subject. I was born in a republic. I'm not a subject. I had become a subject of King Alcohol. And I just love this chapter. But you use these words, Bill Sherbuck, most ostentatious and elaborate writing, you said. And then you said ornate and extravagant. Please help me say that you were having enough day when you wrote that. But you're writing as a writer, of course, aren't you? You're writing, you're quoting, or you're analyzing it, or you're commenting as a writer.
It's not so much analysis, David. It's a reaction.
Yeah.
It's just one of the things, I was telling somebody just yesterday, Sarah and I, we both appreciate good writing, at least what we think is good writing, and we always seem to agree on it. I mean, she'll tell me I've got to read. I remember one time she told me I had to read some article in the New Yorker about chicken farms, and I was like, I don't want to read 12 pages on chicken farms. And she was like, this is really well written, William. You got to read this. And I did read it, and it was really well written. It's just there's good writing, and we had a Zoom call with a woman who got sober at the same time we did, and we haven't talked to her a while, but she's written a book, and she wanted to get together with us on Zoom to talk about what she might be able to do with that, and she read us a section, and man, it was really well written. It was just wonderful, and David, I get sent a fair number of things that people have written that they would like to get published, and let me tell you, most of it is painful. Really. I mean, for me, it's painful. I don't know. Maybe it reads well for other people, but it doesn't read well for me. So this whole, where are we, David? What page am I on here?
Well, I have it on my thing here.
Yeah, I don't need it. I'll find it in the thing here. It's
I find it
428.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah. As we became subjects, okay, so right there, I'm going south, of King Alcohol, okay, shivering denizens of his mad realm. I mean, it's just like,
it's great. I love it. It's great.
Give me a freaking big break here,
Well, listen, I'm reading that. That was me, but I'm identifying. I'm thinking I was a shivering denizen of this alcohol king.
Well, David, if it, different strokes for different folks, as we say,
but you're looking at it from,
but it's just that sounds like pure Hank Parker's to me. It really does.
I appreciate it. But do you think you've been a bit too harsh on it, though, Bill?
I find the writing. I mean, I know you identify with it. I'm not taking you down for that. I'm not going to.
No, I do.
But I find that writing laughable.
Right. Wow, that's interesting. Gigi is nodding as well. What does that say about me? I often, when I get to that, I say, what does that say about me then? But I love it. I think it's great.
David, if it's standing between you and the insanity of picking up the first drink, we love it. It's wonderful writing.
And your writing is wonderful. I do love your writing, but I think Wilson really talks to me when I read that as an alcoholic. Yeah. But thank you for that. I appreciate you commenting back on that. I really do. So Gigi, you're not. I thought you liked that as well. Gigi, you don't like that as well?
I can't stand the purple prose.
Oh my!
I have never liked the purple prose. It was one of my objections, along with the sexist tone of the book. That was one of my primary reactions of angst and just what really. This is the book that's supposed to get me sober. Oh, ugh. And I love Trudge. Trudge balances out that purple prose for me.
Right.
Trudge makes it real. Trudge
right,
is
okay.
The definition that I have for trudge is not this to walk slowly and heavily because you are tired or working very hard. The definition I have is to walk with purpose. And that makes a lot of sense to me. To walk with purpose I'm trudging. Okay. It doesn't imply that I'm overburdened and, just so stressed out trying to stay sober. No, I have some reason to be doing this work. And it makes sense to me. Whereas the drama of Purple Prose doesn't do it for me at all.
Yeah, that's interesting. It doesn't.
Not at all. Um,
Hey, Gigi, I just got a note that in the book that started it all, which has all the corrections and suggestions for changes,
yeah.
nobody thought trudge was a problem. There's no suggestion to change trudge.
Ah.
Yeah. Yeah. So obviously people who were working hard felt like they were trudging. I do have a question. And I mean, you know me, I'm always going to ask about the wives, right? The numbers on pages 430 and 431, or page 430, it refers to men and women, but there weren't any women alcoholics at this time, were there? And on 431, it talks about 60 to 80 people in the room. And then on 432, it talks about 30 to 40 people. They're talking about the alcoholic men and their wives here, are they not? You're muted, Bill.
No.
Wilson played fast and loose with those numbers all the time. I mean, it's just,
Yeah.
it's just, so I don't really know. I mean, one of the problems is we don't have that, are we talking about just the men who are there, who are sober and not drinking, and we're discounting the wife or not? I don't really know. I mean, Lois has that wonderful letter she sends to Bill sometime in 1938 describing a New York meeting. It's the only thing we've got solid on what a New York meeting really looked and sounded like as she describes it. But she says how many are there, and you don't know whether she's counting the alcoholics or just the alcoholics or the alcoholics and their wives.
Okay.
Yeah,
And then can I just interrupt and say, didn't he also invite non-alcoholics and their wives to attend some of the meetings? I seem to remember seeing that in some of the letters in this book.
not in New York. No,
No?
they were pretty.
Didn't he invite Frank Amos and his wife or
Oh, well, those are the rock. Those people are like in a. They considered those guys to be in AA. I mean, they were the
Okay,
trustees
okay.
of their foundation. You know, Willard Richardson certainly gets an invite. I'm not sure he went, but certainly Frank Amos and his wife went at least once. I know it's it's
Okay.
rock solid in the letters. That he did that. But yeah, I other than that, no, I don't. I mean, I don't think there's no evidence that he ever invited Sam Shoemaker, for instance. He might have, but if he was trying to distance himself from the Oxford group, I think he would have tried to distance himself from Sam Shoemaker in a Tuesday night meeting in Brooklyn. But I'm speculating. Capital letters,
Right.
underline,
He had him
bold.
on the stage in 50 or whatever. Yeah.
Well, that was a whole, now we're off the ground, and people know what we are. It's in that book, it's not for singers only. It's not, it's
Yeah.
not Vic Kitchens, I was a pagan kind of stuff. It's
Just on a note in Chicago history, I know that it was pretty much the original meetings were pretty much the alcoholics that were, I mean, Earl Treat had his wife there, of course, and Sylvia Kaufman had her partner, Grace Cultus, but a lot from what I've read of Chicago, early days, they were pretty much just the alkies that came to the meetings.
yeah. Yeah. By the way, someone just asked in the chat about the book, that the one online on Amazon says it was published in 1919. That's the first printing. The
2019.
current hardback that's available there, which is illegally being offered by Central Recovery Press on Amazon, is in fact the sixth printing of the hardback, which has all the changes I've made and that I'm ever going to make. And hopefully, after we have a court date in Las Vegas, Nevada on the 23rd of this month, hopefully we'll get some forward motion. Either we'll take the goddamn thing offline or a guy will go to jail or something. I don't know.
Thank you, Gigi. Great stuff. I love this. Oliver G.
Hi. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes, Oliver, you sound good.
First of all, I would say that I've really enjoyed the reading the Purple Prose, you know, because my first time reading the big book back then, my internal monologue was so full of grandiosity and, you know, grandiose ideas that it really struck a chord with me. Like, this book is talking my language, you know.
That's good.
I have a question about yeah, uh, going back to like when I was reading the big book for the very first time
That's good.
in the YMCA in West Ealing, and I had been an atheist for about from the age of 19 to the age of 35. Uh, so I wasn't keen on religion at all. But reading A Vision for You, I came across the phrase "in an upper room of the house," and immediately I thought, "Hang on, that's biblical language, isn't it? Isn't that some kind of dog whistle?" So that sounded like that was intentionally inserted to kind of, you know, indicate where the program came from. Is that right? Is it biblical?
Well, yeah, it's certainly biblical. The upper room was where Jesus held the Last Supper. And one of the there was a pamphlet, a Methodist pamphlet called In the Upper Room that came out monthly, I think, Jim, monthly, not weekly, it was
Yeah.
monthly. And they used that in the meetings. That was one of the things besides the New Testament that they actually used. But what they're talking about is the second floor bedroom at T. Henry Williams' house. When the new guy comes in, before you got to get on your knees and surrender before you can come to the meeting. So they would take him upstairs to the upper room, and a couple of guys would go with him, and they would take his surrender. And once they had his surrender, then he could come to the meeting.
Oh, wow.
And certainly, although they're not really explicit about it at the time, you know, you were talking about getting your knees and surrender to Jesus. That's what they're doing. It was a purely Christian thing, you know. So yeah, good call. That's what it was in the upper room. But yeah, that's where that's biblical language, and that's where they mentioned the Last Supper took place, was in the upper room.
Thank you. Oliver, you're in
And
West London.
excuse me, and I've been to Jerusalem. I've been in the upper room, except it's in a building that was built in 700 AD, not in zero. So there you go. Credit the Franciscans for the fraud.
Good story. Good story. Oliver, you're in West London. You're in West London. Is that where you are? Yeah. Hot man. Thank you. Robert J, are you coming in before I want to ask Bill something one more? Robert, are you coming in? You're unmuted. Did you want to come in? No, Robert, you're not. Bill, I have to ask you about could you elaborate a little bit on the fact that he wrote 34, you said 34 paragraphs out of the 56 paragraphs in this chapter are devoted, might be the right word, but dedicated, if you want, to Akron. How did he get away with that with the New York crowd? That he only gave the New York the kind of he put Akron as center stage. How did he kind of get away with that?
Well, I don't think it was a get away with anything, David. I think the people in Akron were very aware of the attitudes towards Bill Wilson individually and towards the book project specifically out in Akron. So, I mean, it seems to me like it's a pretty bold-faced, transparent, blowing smoke at Akron to get them on their side. Just as, you know, Wilson was a consummate politician. I've said that over and over again. You know, I mean, he had in June, late June letter to Dr. Bob, probably the 24th, he wanted, you know, Anne to write a story for the back of the book, the life of an alcoholic. And again, I think that was just a political move. Man, we could get, now Bob has to write something for the book because his quote unquote sponsor, they didn't call him that at the time, but the guy who got him sober is telling him he's got to write a story and mail it over to New York. But boy, if we could get Anne to write a story, how cool that'd maybe sell this whole book idea to those people out there that are being such a pain in the ass out in Akron, Ohio about it. So I don't think there was pushback on that, David. I think they were pretty damn clear that in New York that they had the answers, and it was a much more liberal, less Oxford group. You know, I mean, the absolutes have been gone for a year at this point. They were gone, baby. You know, they weren't doing the absolutes in New York. You can go to Ohio AA today, and somebody will tell you got to do the 4 absolutes.
Wow, thanks, Bill. Thanks, Bill. And does anyone else want to come in and say Hank Parker, Sky Wilson? Oh, there you go. Robert, you jump in. Come on, please.
Yeah, my name is Robert. I'm not Bill, you answered my question about the upper room. You know, because I love the vision for you, and I thought Clarence Snyder went up to the upper room too. But you answered my question.
No, Clarence, most guys did their surrender in the hospital. And Clarence
Right.
he famously did his surrender in the hospital. I quote that in the book here. You know, Dr. Bobbs said, you know, you got to get on your knees and surrender to Jesus. And Clarence says, I don't pray. And he said, get on your knees. I'll tell you what. And then Clarence gets on his knees and Dr. Bob says, Jesus, this is Clarence. He's a drunk and he needs your help. And Clarence, this is Jesus. You better ask him for help. You know, he literally says that stuff. That's what they were doing. But most of these guys were in fact taking their surrenders, doing their surrenders in the hospital on their knees. And then they could just go to the meeting because, oh yeah, we got his surrender. But his ticket's punched. But if it didn't happen in the hospital, then you had to go. If you're coming to T. Henry Williams' house on a Wednesday night, you had to go up in the upper room and get on your knees and do a surrender.
Okay, yeah, you answered my question. Thank you, Bill.
You're welcome.
Thomas, nice.
Yeah, Bill, I just would like, if you have time, our friend in Australia had a follow-up question on the printing of the book before she is able to purchase it in Australia. She wants to know how she can be sure that she's getting the most current printing and updated version of the book.
Well, I appreciate Thomas. The most common at the moment, the only copy available online is the hardback with a dust jacket. And the hardback with the dust jacket is currently being printed by a company named Ingram Sparks. That's the only way you can get an Amazon dust jacketed book. You got to go through Ingram Sparks. And those books are printed on demand. So it's not like there's old fifth printings floating around or fourth printings floating around, you know. This is going to be the sixth printing because that's the only files they have are the updated sixth printing files.
Yeah. I'll put that up on the Facebook page. I'll put that details up on the Facebook page. I'll commit to putting that up there. We have a Writing the Big Book Facebook page, so I'll get that information and put it up there. Bill, I have to ask you something. I'm not forgetting it. And it was good. It was really good, Bill. It was really good. And while I have you here, I wanted to ask. I can't remember for the life of me. Oh, has anyone else got that and they want to ask a question with that chapter, A Vision for You? And you working with you. There you go, Oliver. You want to come back in? Because Bill, we have about 5 minutes.
Yeah, just a quick question. About Bill W.'s birthday and all the telegrams he got. I didn't see any mention of a telegram from Dr. Bob. Is there any evidence that there was any kind of personal animosity between our co-founders at that time?
No, none whatsoever. No, none whatsoever. I mean, no. They were always cordial by all estimates and all, you know. When Bob came down, he stayed with them, you know, and he did that on a couple of occasions in 1938. And yeah, no. I don't see any evidence of that at all, and I've never heard any evidence, you know, that was even a rumor. You know, the rumor in Ohio, according to Dr. Bob's son, Bobby, the rumor currently in Ohio, the guys who are objecting to the whole process, and most especially the book, said it was a project cooked up by these two guys from Vermont. So they were throwing Bill and Bob into the same, you know, pool, you know, and that was it, man. They were because I think they were pretty much, you know, the image is that they were pretty much joined at the hip and they were talking to each other left and right. They weren't talking to each other left and right. They weren't sending letters back every 3 days. They weren't sending telegrams every 3 days. I thought it was interesting that Bob Smith actually called on the phone. Because, you know, we're talking 1938 here, folks. You know, I mean, I can remember in the early 50s. I'm an old guy. I can remember in the early 50s, if you wanted to call California, you had to go through Toledo, and then it went to Chicago, and then it went to Denver, and then it went to finally the hookup. You know, the phone system was crap in 1938. Crap. And it was expensive. It was expensive. Lois at one point bitches about some guy running up a bill for $1.38 or something like that because he's calling down to Virginia to find out about some old girlfriend is she married. And yeah, so anyhow, so for Bob to call him was a big deal. They did a lot of stuff, it seems, with telegrams, a few of which have been preserved. I'm sure there was more than that, but yeah, no, those guys seem to be joined at the hip. I think that's an accurate picture that they were in lockstep in a let's not drink deal,
Mm. So,
Gigi.
Gigi, can I just ask just something
It's
before
quick.
can I just say one thing? Bill, you said about the change you put in the book about the co-founder. You said you were wrong with 47. It was 43 you've come up with, isn't that right? That Dr. Bob wasn't considered a co-founder in 43?
Yeah, I think the first mention was 1942 actually, but
42.
if you've got the old version of the book, then you got the addendum online. You can pull that down and do that. But yeah, it's
Yeah.
that is on. I don't know what page it is. If Randy was here, he'd know.
Randy'd know that just off the bat he would know. This is why you need a group of people, yeah. But people can get that. I mean, they can get that, but you did change it in it's on the addendum, as you said, as well, and it's changed in the 6th printing. Do you want to? Will we wait for you to get it, or do you want to?
That's good. Don't worry about it.
No, but that's just 40 for anyone listening. 42. He wasn't considered a co-founder, not 42. I just blew my head away when I heard that for the first time. Gigi, jump in.
My question was going back to the phone call versus the telegrams. Isn't it true that a phone call would have been a lot more expensive than a telegram? And weren't telegrams delivered to the house in those days?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. They were much less. I mean, people were sending telegrams all the time. I just and I was just reading a book on the sinking of the Lusitania called Dead Wake by Eric Larson. It was a pretty interesting, but Eric Larson's a great writer. But everybody's sending telegrams. That's what they're doing. They send this is 1915. We're all sending telegrams all over the place. Because if the phone system was primitive in 1938, it was really, really, really primitive in 1915. So yeah, that's how people communicated. Telegrams.
Bill, I found a page 69. It's in Dr. Bob's hospital's story. So page 69 it's on. It's in the subsection Bill and Dr. Bob, the relationship status.
Got it right here. So it says, 1942 and then 1943 are the two dates mentioned there. And it's right there. So anyhow, David.
Yes, you got to go, Alice. Unfortunately, you got to go. We have to let you go. That was great. Now listen, I know for certain this week, Bill Sherberg's favorite chapter is next week. I know this for a fact. I know it's a fact. I've written it down. I know for a fact. Now, we're back next week for that, and we're going to be starting Bill's YouTube channel. If you want to jump in on that on a Friday night, we're going to be once a month, we're going to do one, and maybe do even more. I mean, there's so much great. Now, that's not blowing smoke, Bill. It's a fact. There's just so much great stuff, and I think I'm around long enough to know what's great stuff and what's not great stuff, and this is great stuff. This is like top shelf whiskey when I like to drink. This is the real good stuff we're getting here. So we're going back to you, Bill, to close, and I really appreciate all you do for us to read the Evening Gather. Give our love to Sarah as well, won't you? Thank you.
Well, indeed. So I'd like to close with Evening Gatha. I sometimes have to point out that this is one of the beauties of the Buddhist Gathas are that they're personal. It's not petitioning the Lord kind of stuff. So it's personal, and I read it as a personal thing for me. Let me respectfully remind you, William, life and death are of supreme importance. Time swiftly passes by and opportunity is lost. You really need to awaken to the present moment. Take heed. This very night, your days are diminished by one. Do not squander your life.
Thank you, Bill Sherberg. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Bill. What a great session today. Learned a lot. Thank you very much. And happy 4th of July.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Wonderful workshop. See you guys
Thank you so
tomorrow.
much.
See you,
Thank
Kathy.
you, Bill. Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
See you all
Thank you,
next week.
Billy. Happy 4th of July.
Yes,
Birthplace of AA, the USA. Thank you.
indeed
Wonderful.
for that. Indeed for that. Yes, 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 yes.
Take
Thank you,
care.
Thank you
David.
so
Thank you.
much.
Thank you, everyone. What did Rita say? She's going to pay $125 for it. Oh my God, they get it from America. Oh. Oh, everyone is jumping off on us. That's it. We've stopped the recording. You all gone. Everyone's gone. Stop recording. You enjoy that. You did.
Yes, very good.